Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. Have you ever felt stuck with knowing something is true and watching people kind of stumble around in the dark while you're just like, I know what's going on here, but it feels like you're cursed because nobody believes you.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's a very compelling idea. Um, Having this unique perspective on things
hmm
and then trying to navigate a world that's maybe not ready to see what you see.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of at the heart of what we're diving into today. We're going to be taking a look at the first few chapters of The Seer, which is a debut novel by Raquel Levitt. And within the first few pages, you're just pulled into this first person narrative. It's really interesting. It blends the kind of intimate struggles of this young woman with elements of the supernatural, but also this really strong, but sometimes complicated bond of family. So if you're into stories that make you think about perception and what it takes to stand by your truths, even when it seems impossible, then definitely hit that like and subscribe button.
Yeah, and speaking of the book, you can actually find a link to this here in the description below.
hmm
One of the things that struck me right away was the cover itself. You've got endorsements from Jane Loeb Rubin, who talks about how the plot just pulls you in and the way that it weaves together personal drama with this really strong sense of family. And then you've got Carolyn Korsmeyer, who highlights this sort of central tension, right? You've
Yeah.
got a protagonist whose psychic abilities actually become kind of an obstacle when she needs people to believe her. It's really fascinating. And then on top of that, you've got this dedication to the author's mother, who's described as the strongest woman I know. So you get this sense that the idea of resilience and family strength is going to be really important throughout the story.
Okay, so let's dive in. I guess our mission here is to understand how Raquel Y. Levitt kind of sets things up in these first chapters. You know, how she introduces us to Sarah, who lives in Missouri in 1896, and this really extraordinary ability that she has. And I'm really interested to see how her unique perspective immediately shapes the conflicts that she faces, both in her community and within her family.
Yeah.
So, what are the initial stakes here, and what themes is the author starting to explore?
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're being invited to step into Sarah's shoes and see the world through her eyes. It's not just about what she sees, but it's about understanding what it means to see those things in a world that's kind of blind to them.
Right. So chapter one starts off in rural Missouri. It's 1896, and we're immediately inside Sarah's head. It's first person narration, and she just comes right out and tells us about this ability she has to perceive mist colors that come from people at church. And it's not like a vague feeling, it's a real visual experience for her. She sees these colors and she believes that they reflect people's inner states, their true feelings, their thoughts, even their physical well being. It's amazing. And she's so certain about it. She says, mist colors don't lie, even if people do. So right away, we know that this is going to be a really important part of the story.
Yeah, it definitely sets up a really unique dynamic.
Yeah.
Sarah's understanding of reality is completely different from everyone else's. And as readers, we're kind of in on the secret.
Yeah.
We know things that most of the characters don't. And it's particularly interesting that this all starts in a church, right? It's a place where people are supposed to be putting on their best selves.
Yeah.
But through Sarah's eyes, it becomes this place where all these hidden emotions and intentions are revealed.
That's a great point. The contrast between the outward appearance of the church and what Sarah sees is really striking. She describes some of the colors as repulsive, like moss green or bile yellow. So right away, that something isn't quite right. And then we get to the real catalyst for the conflict. Sarah's sister Catherine reveals something about the Pastor Garrett, and a Mrs. Stanton. And this happens right in the middle of the church service. It causes this huge scene and really shakes things up.
Yeah, and this is where Sarah's belief in her mist colors becomes so important. Whether the community believes Catherine or not, Sarah can see that what Catherine is saying aligns with what she's perceiving. So right away, they're at odds with the authority figures in their community. And it raises this question of what happens when you possess a truth that most people can't even see? Is it a gift or is it a burden?
That's the question, isn't it? And Sarah's first instinct is to defend Catherine. She even says that it should have been me who revealed what happened. So you get the sense that she feels responsible in some way. And then we see Grandma Rose's reaction. Her mist darkens and she has this crinkled forehead. It's subtle, but it makes you wonder if she maybe understands what Sarah's going through or if she has some similar ability herself. It hints at a family history with this kind of thing.
Yeah, that detail about Grandma Rose is really intriguing. It's like they have this unspoken language, a way of communicating without words.
Mm.
And then you got the pastor's response, which is so telling. Instead of addressing what Catherine has said, he just goes on the defensive. He talks about his and Mrs. Stanton's impeccable reputations and threatens everyone with hellfire. It's classic deflection. He's using his authority to shut down dissent and maintain control. It really highlights the danger of challenging the status quo.
It does, and the fallout is immediate. I mean, gossip spreads through Rolla like wildfire. The fact that Catherine was the first to reveal the pastor's secret becomes this huge deal. It's not about the truth, it's about who dared to speak it. And then it spills over into their lives at school. Other kids start taunting Sarah and Catherine. They say that Sarah and Grandma Rose are spawned from the devil. It's scary how quickly fear and prejudice can take hold.
That scene at the school is so powerful. It shows the real social cost of speaking truth to power. The way those kids treat Sarah and Catherine, it's just a reflection of what their parents are saying and feeling.
Yeah.
And that label spawned from the devil. It's meant to demonize them to make them seem evil just because they're different.
Absolutely. And Sarah's reaction is really interesting. She's fiercely protective of her Grandma Rose, who she sees as an angel on earth, even though Grandma Rose has been kicked out of church for good. So when this girl Beth says that they're spawned from the devil, Sarah punches her right in the mouth. It's not just a kid getting into a fight. It's a much deeper act of defiance.
Yeah, it shows how far Sarah is willing to go to protect her family. And it also suggests that there's this anger simmering beneath the surface. She's not just this passive observer. She's capable of violence when she feels like she needs to be.
And her dad picks up on that. When he confronts her about the fight, he's not just angry about the violence itself. He's worried about what's driving it. And his advice, he tells her not to let other people's negativity bring out the darkness within her. It feels really personal, like he's speaking from experience.
And then he reveals that his own mother had a similar ability. He calls it the foresight. And he talks about how they were ostracized and attacked because of it. It explains so much about his reaction to Sarah's abilities. He's terrified of history repeating itself. He just wants to keep his family safe.
Exactly. He's carrying so much baggage from the past. So chapter 2 picks up right after the church incident, and you can feel the tension in the house. Daddy comes home from town, and he's unusually quiet. Sarah describes his mist as hazy, and Grandma Rose notices it right away. She can tell that something's wrong. It's interesting how these mist colors function as this unspoken language between them.
Right, like they have this extra layer of communication that goes beyond words. And it makes you think that maybe Sarah's ability isn't as unique as she thinks. Maybe it's something that runs in the family.
Maybe. So even though things are tense, Daddy announces that they're going to go back to church the next morning. He says they have nothing to be ashamed of. It seems like he's trying to reclaim some sense of control or normalcy. And then Grandma Rose suggests that he invite Miss Emma to supper, which is kind of surprising. It feels like a step towards healing and opening themselves up to new relationships after losing Mama.
Yeah, it's a really tender moment.
Yeah.
And it introduces Miss Emma, who Sarah describes as having these pretty golden brown eyes and pale green or sometimes soft blue mist colors. She seems like a genuinely good person, and you get the sense that Grandma Rose sees her as a potential source of support for Daddy.
Yeah, definitely. And the next morning, it seems like Daddy has taken Grandma Rose's advice. His mist is bright, he looks handsome, he even smells good. It's a moment of hope amidst all the darkness. But as they're walking to church, Sarah starts to feel uneasy again. She says her arm hair prickling, and Catherine feels it too. It's like they know that something bad is going to happen.
Yeah, it's that classic foreshadowing. Something's off. And then you notice that Mrs. Stanton and Roy Stanton, who's the choir leader, are both missing from the service. Given what just happened, it's clear that the fallout from Catherine's revelation is far from over.
And then as they're leaving the church, Pastor Garrett basically curses them. He yells at them to change their ways and says that there will be trouble in your future and hell to pay with your souls. And the reaction from the rest of the congregation is even worse. They start hissing at the Richardson family like a bunch of snakes. Only their neighbor, Tom Clifton, and Miss Emma stand apart from the crowd. It's a really powerful scene.
Yeah, it's like this visual representation of how completely they've been ostracized. The hissing, it's so primal and unsettling. It shows just how vulnerable they are in this community. And the silence from Tom Clifton and Miss Emma, it speaks volumes. It's like a quiet act of solidarity.
It's chilling.
Yeah.
So chapter 3 opens with this really emotional scene at Mama's grave. Daddy's crying, Grandma Rose is whispering apologies, Catherine's sobbing. It feels like they're saying goodbye to a part of their lives. And then we find out that they're moving. Daddy has accepted a new job working for a Mr. Breyer, so there's this sense of hope that maybe they can start fresh somewhere else.
It's a literal uprooting, right? They're trying to escape the negativity and judgment they faced in Rolola. But as we'll see, moving doesn't necessarily solve all their problems.
Right. When they meet the Briars for the first time, Sarah's mist color observations are really interesting. She sees that Mrs. Briar has this gray-brown mist, which she interprets as unhappiness or maybe even a sense of being trapped. And then Mr. Briar has this slimy, moss-colored mist, which immediately makes Grandma Rose uneasy. She even mentions a potential sickness of the mind. So right away, you know that something's not right about these people.
Yeah, Sarah's observations throughout their visit just add to that feeling of unease. The way Mr. Briar treats his wife, it's so dismissive and condescending. He interrupts her, ignores her opinions. It's clear that there's this really unhealthy power dynamic between them.
And then in chapter 4, things take a really dark turn. Catherine comes to Sarah visibly upset and tells her that she saw Mr. Briar whipping Mrs. Briar with a belt. It's a shocking revelation, and Sarah's first instinct is to deny it. You know, she just wants to pretend that everything's okay. It's a natural reaction when you're confronted with something so horrible.
Yeah, especially after everything they've already been through. But deep down, Sarah knows that Catherine's telling the truth. And then her dad unwittingly adds fuel to the fire. He asks Grandma Rose to bake a peach pie for Mildred Briar, saying that she had a fall and broke her arm.
Yeah.
But Grandma Rose's reaction is so telling. Her mist dims and she gets this tight look on her face. It's like she knows that something else is going on.
Exactly. It's that unspoken communication again. They all suspect that Daddy's explanation isn't the whole story. So when Sarah and Catherine take the pie to the Briars' house, they're hoping to get a glimpse of Mildred and see for themselves what's going on.
And the description of the Briars' house is really interesting, even just the detail about the chandelier. It emphasizes the difference in their social standing and makes you wonder if they're trying to hide something behind this facade of wealth and respectability.
And when they finally see Mildred, it's heartbreaking. She's clearly trying to put on a brave face, but there's this obvious bruise on her arm, and her demeanor is so hesitant, it confirms everything that Catherine saw.
Yeah, there's no denying the truth anymore.
Yeah.
It puts Sarah and Catherine in this incredibly difficult position. They know that Mildred is being abused, but what can they do about it?
And in chapter 5, Catherine's distress gets even worse. She has this really disturbing dream where she sees Mildred being beaten again. This time, Mildred's trying to protect her stomach, and Catherine senses that she's pregnant. It adds this whole other layer of urgency and horror to the situation.
Yeah, the stakes are so much higher now.
Yeah.
It's not just about Mildred anymore. It's about an unborn child, too.
And Sarah's terrified of what will happen if Daddy finds out what Catherine's seeing. She knows that he'll want to protect them, but she also knows that he's afraid of getting involved. It's a really tough spot to be in.
It really highlights the conflict between wanting to do the right thing and wanting to keep your family safe.
So in chapter 6, Daddy tries to put a stop to all of it. He tells the girls that they're not to interfere in the Briars' affairs. He makes Sarah promise, but Catherine refuses. She says that she didn't make any promises, and it's clear that she's going to try to help Mildred no matter what.
Catherine's defiance is amazing.
Yeah.
It shows just how strong her sense of justice is and how much she cares about Mildred's well-being.
And Sarah's torn. You know, she promised her dad, but she also can't stand by and watch Catherine put herself in danger. So she starts to come up with a plan. We don't know what it is yet, but it shows that she's not giving up.
Yeah, that moment is crucial. It marks a turning point for Sarah.
Yeah.
She's not just observing anymore. She's taking action.
And then in chapter 7, things come to a head. Grandma Rose wakes up in the middle of the night in a panic. She's had another dream this time about Catherine, and she knows that Catherine's gone to try to help Mildred. It's like there's this psychic connection between them. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it suggests that their abilities run deeper than we initially thought. It adds this whole other layer of mystery to the family dynamic.
So Daddy wakes up and he's furious. He demands to know where Catherine is, and Sarah tries to cover for her, but eventually Grandma Rose tells him the truth. She says that Catherine went to help Mrs. Briar because her husband's been beating her.
And Daddy's reaction is intense. He's so angry, and he immediately decides to go after Catherine. It's like all his fear and caution just disappears in that moment. All he can think about is protecting his daughters.
Yeah, he's finally realizing the gravity of the situation, and as he's rushing out the door, Sarah tries to tell him about Mildred's pregnancy, but he just brushes her off. He says it's none of their business, and he demands his boots. It's heartbreaking because you know that Sarah's trying to warn him, but he's not listening.
It leaves you on the edge of your seat. Yeah. You know something bad is going to happen, but you don't know what.
So let's take a step back. What are the key takeaways from these first few chapters of the Seer? What's standing out to you?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is this idea of hidden truths. You know, Sarah has this ability to see beneath the surface, to perceive things that most people can't. And it creates all these conflicts because she's constantly bumping up against a world that doesn't want to see what she sees.
Right. And then you've got the theme of social pressure. I mean, we see how quickly the community turns on the Richardson family after Catherine's revelation. It shows how powerful conformity can be and how dangerous it is to challenge the status quo.
And then, of course, there's the issue of abuse. What's happening to Mildred is horrific, and it forces the Richardson family to confront this darkness that's lurking beneath the surface of their new community.
And I think it's important to acknowledge the courage that both Sarah and Catherine display. Catherine's willing to defy her own father to do what she thinks is right. And Sarah's learning to trust her instincts and to stand up for what she believes in, even when it's scary.
Absolutely. These early chapters set the stage for some really complex and challenging explorations of family loyalty, moral responsibility, and the nature of truth itself.
So for everyone listening, what are your thoughts on what we've discussed so far? What resonated with you the most? Were there any moments or details that really stood out? What are your predictions for what's going to happen next?
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen when Daddy finds Catherine? What about Mildred's pregnancy?
Right.
How will the community react to all of this? It's a really compelling setup, and I'm eager to see where the story goes from here.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the beginning of the Seer. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these initial chapters, so be sure to leave a comment below. What was your favorite moment? What resonated with you the most? Let's keep the conversation going. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. And if you're intrigued by what we've discussed today, definitely check out the Seer for yourself. You can find a link in the description. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking those deeper truths.